Hey everybody! Look at that. I'm on television. I'm back again. So I've kind of reached an impasse on that thing I was trying to get at. I know that it's in there somewhere, but I've kind of reached an end. I'll get back to it. I'm reading a book right now. See if I can find it. I can't remember what it's called. It's by the guy that wrote Reaganland. Anyway. Man, so I thought, and I'm thinking that book will maybe get me back to where I need to be. But either way, listen. So I gotta share with you my brain disease this evening. I gotta tell you about this problem that I have. So because of my political perspective, it's very hard for me to like watch movies or TV shows or like I don't even know, read books, like just enjoy entertainment in general without thinking about the like political applications of it. It's kind of like that thing of like, you know, you say, you know what, you never see yellow cars, and then for like 3 weeks all you see is fucking yellow cars, you know. And so it's that thing of like, or the arrow in the FedEx logo. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. It's like that thing where once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And so like a lot of stuff that I enjoy from an entertainment aspect, it kind of drives me like crazy. And this is one of those things that like I probably drive Tori crazy doing this to her after we watch this type of shit. So I wanted to show you guys this shit, and I'm gonna get a little fancy here. I'm gonna get a little fancy and do something I haven't done before, and pretend like I know how technology works. And I want to show you guys the trailer for this movie Tori and I watched last night, and then tell you about how it relates to everything that we've been talking about. So here we go.
What do you dream for? That less people have to say goodbye too soon to people they love.
I'd heard about Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. We know her story is so compelling. She was going to herald a revolution in medical treatment in this country.
It was obviously such an incredible story. A woman creating this $9 billion company.
$9 billion. Keep that number in your head.
She could do no wrong. She was the next Steve Jobs.
The idea with the Edison was to stick the lab inside the box.
She wanted Edison devices in every home in America.
This could be the upload of healthcare.
You all are part of something that is going to change our world. What higher purpose is there?
Elizabeth came to me, and she described.
All right, hold on, bro. Look at this chick's eyes. Look at her eyes. There is no soul behind those eyes. Those are just the eye. Like when you're being bit by a shark, those are the eyes that are looking at you.
Your idea. It's impossible physically.
Elizabeth was lying about the accuracy of the blood tests.
It's all a show.
She didn't want anybody to see what was going on in there.
We don't need to explain ourselves to competitive companies.
She aligned herself with
Hold on.
Explain ourselves to
Look at her. Come on, bro. Come on.
competitive companies.
She aligned herself with very powerful men who succumbed to a certain charm.
She was deceiving investors to the tune of $400 million. It comes back to fake it until you make it. There was definitely something going on behind the scenes. She had bulletproof glass on the windows.
Anything they typed was watched. It was very scary.
Like, what are they trying to hide?
The mantra in Silicon Valley is move fast, break things.
That's not the way you approach science that's going to be impacting people's lives.
Quite frankly, people can die.
It snowballed into this crazy situation.
In a panic, I went and bought a burner phone. I called the Wall Street Journal.
What is coming out of her mouth is not reality.
She never thought she
Standing in the White House. Standing in the White House.
have many secrets.
All right, so we watched this doc last night, right? About Crazy Shark Eyes lady. And here, let me close this out real quick. Yeah. So we watched this doc last night about Crazy Shark Eyes lady and her idea to transform healthcare in America, right? So this lady sets out, right? And she's one of these, like, I was 19 years old at Stanford, and I decided to drop out because I had this brilliant tech idea and I was going to change the world with Silicon Valley and all that kind of bullshit, right? So she sets out and she's working with, like, mentors that are, like, big business, ex-business people that work for Apple and Facebook and Google and stuff like that. So she's working with all these cretins, and they're basically telling her, like, oh yeah, you could be the next Bill Gates. Go for your dreams. Go for your dreams. And so she has this idea that what she's going to do, you go to, if you've ever gone and got, like, blood work done, they do, like, a vein poke, and they take, like, a good amount of blood, right? Like a tube that tall, of blood, maybe several times over, so that they can test everything they need to test, because they need a large blood volume. And basically the point is, like, it requires a lot of blood to test blood because our technology is so old that this technology hasn't advanced since, like, the 50s, basically. We're still testing blood the way that we tested blood in the 50s. And the reason for that is we have, like, 80 to 90% of the testing that's done in this country. So that's every drug test that's done for any employer. That's every drug test that's done on an athlete. That's every drug test that's done by law enforcement. And then all sorts of medical tests, right? Like, everything that your doctor does when they go and take your levels and stuff. Think about the number of people in America with heart disease and diabetes and all that kind of stuff, right? Obesity-related diseases that require them to go and have their blood taken all the time, right? So these are millions, if not billions, of tests, individual tests, done every year in this country, right? And the majority of that market is dominated by two companies. I forget what they're called. One is LabCorp, and I forget what the other one is. But anyway, so they have basically a duopoly on this market, and so they have no incentive to, this is the big, like, thing that all these, like, capitalist right wingers and stuff jerk off about, is, like, when there's competition, there's innovation, and that's what drives innovation, right? And this proves that that's not true. These two companies have managed to buy up all the smaller companies and consolidate all the other companies, and now they own 80 to 90% of the market share for testing in every circumstance in America, right? And in one of the largest, most expensive healthcare systems in the world, right? And so that is just proof that, like, they have no reason to innovate on this technology, because screw it, they're making all this money. They've been sued by the federal government multiple times for defrauding Medicaid and Medicare and stuff like that. And so, they're just out and out ripping us off as taxpayers, number one, but then also ripping us off as just regular point of service stuff. Like, you go and get a blood test done, you're getting ripped off, right? And the market is not providing the means to lower those costs. The market is not providing the means for these companies to innovate so that we can have better technology. So basically her pitch to all these venture capital people is, I'm going to change the way, you saw in the trailer, I'm going to change the way that blood is taken, and we're going to only have to take, like, this much blood and be able to test for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of diseases. Now, you can imagine, I'm an idiot, I don't know anything about medicine or whatever, and that would be game-changing, right? Because, like, they just prick my finger and they can tell me everything that's going to be wrong with me. Well, shit, I'm going to go to the doctor once a month and have my blood taken, and hopefully I catch shit early, right? Because it wouldn't be such an undertaking, it wouldn't be so strenuous on your body, like that kind of stuff, right? And it wouldn't be so expensive. Well, her idea is to take that a step further. And the thing is her mentor, who is an engineer and, like, a genius, she says, Elizabeth, this is impossible. You can't do this. You can't do it with that little blood. It's physically impossible. There's not enough blood for you to do anything with at all. Like, even if we had the advanced technology that you're claiming we could make, it wouldn't be possible because it's not a large enough volume of blood, which seems obvious, right? And she's like, I don't fuck with you anymore. I'm going to go find somebody that'll give me the right answer. So she goes off and she finds another mentor. And her other mentor is like, oh, no, for sure. You're the next Bill Gates. You're going to change the world. And so she's like, great. Then come work for me at my company and let's do this thing. And she goes around to all these venture capital firms and she pretends like this company doesn't exist for the longest time. She doesn't do any like advertising or marketing. She barely has a website. She's flying under the radar with like a small team of scientists trying to build this magical machine that takes her concept one step further, which is this little like a half a mini fridge size, right? Like a almost like a toaster oven size blood test machine that you can literally keep at your house. So if you're not feeling well, you prick your own finger, you put the blood into the little canister, you put the canister into the machine, and the machine gives you a report or sends a report to your doctor so that you don't have to go to the doctor. You can get regular reports on yourself. It's basically like a smart scale or something like that you have in your home where you can constantly, it's another innovation where you can constantly check up on the state of your body, right? Like an Apple Watch that takes your heart rate and stuff like that, except this is more invasive. It's taking your blood. And so they're developing this, and it's not working, right? And Homeboy's left his tenured job at a university to come work here. But in the meantime, she has gone around, right, with her dead eyes and her lack of soul. She has gone around and raised $9 billion in venture capital money to start this company, when she owns more than 50% of the company, even after the VC money. So she has made, $500 million for herself. Like, let's be conservative and say maybe she made $250 million for herself just by swindling a bunch of shiny-eyed goons with fat wallets. And of course she's, young and attractive, and so these old creep dudes that we know are creeps now, because everybody that she gets money from is the worst. It's just a list of the worst human beings that have ever existed in America. Her investors are like Henry Kissinger, George Bush Sr.'s Secretary of State, Clinton's Secretary of State. You name a government cretin, Mad Dog Mattis, you name a government cretin, and they invested in this company, right? They were like, no, she's a genius. This is going to be awesome. So she's got these billions of dollars. And she goes out to the Stanford University grounds where Google and HP and all these huge tech companies have these lavish headquarters and labs and shit with all the glass, and they're super modern and hipster and shit. Campuses, they call them. And so what the fuck? And so they oh fuck. You totally broke my train of thought, goddamn it. So anyway, they move into this big campus, right? Because that's what all these tech goons call their shit, is a campus. And so they move into this big campus, and they start trying even harder to develop these drugs. And she hires a bunch of goons that are basically just the traveling salesmen of VC Silicon Valley shit. And they basically start a startup. They leave as the CFO and cash out all this fucking stock before the company just completely collapses. And then they use that money to go on to do something else, and they claim that they're geniuses. And so he's a bunch of the higher ups are these guys, and they're kind of pushing her in the direction of yeah, this is going to work. We're going to do this. We're going to change the world. And of course, she's, doe-eyed and very excited about the idea of changing the planet and we're going to save people's lives and all that kind of shit. And so she is going around and telling the employees, you're changing the world. The work that you're doing is incredible. It's going to be amazing. And we're doing this. she goes to Walgreens and she pitches this idea for every Walgreens in America to have one of these machines, so that even like low-income people can go into Walgreens if they can't buy the machine and have it on their counter at home. They can get their thing pricked real easy. Regular blood testing becomes a whole lot more accessible to people. It could save lives. And it turns out, bro, this machine doesn't work. It's never worked. It's never going to work. It is physically impossible. It defies the law of thermodynamics for this machine to exist, even at the size that it's at. On that basic of a level, it is a complete failure. And these people have given her billions of dollars. You know, some of them have individually given her tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in this company. I mean, like I said, the people that are investing in this company are some of the most well-connected men in our society. And she has wrangled up all of their money and swindled them into investing into this company. And it turns out, bro, none of the shit works. And it's never gonna work. And she's just and she knows this. People keep telling her this. Every scientist that she hires, every engineer that she hires that's even worth a shit at all is like, fam, this isn't gonna work. Like, this is not going to work. It's not going to, it defies the laws of science. And she just keeps going, well, I don't think you understand the vision here. Fires them and hires somebody that will say yes, until they have to say no eventually, because it's insane. To the point where literally she gets an actual scientist on board finally, and the guy comes in and says, dude, we can't do this, and you're promising people that we can do this, and you are messing with people's lives. Like, he's starting to think like, dude, you're going to start taking people's blood in these machines and they don't work, and so you're just going to be providing people with bullshit fake test results, because they're not going to say it doesn't work. Their money's on the line now. So they're going to sell the thing and then do some roundabout fakery so that the tests are fake. And they just give out random results, right? So he's like, dude, we can't do this. He's a doctor. He's like, dude, do no harm. We can't do this. This is terrible. Like, you're ruining the world, basically. And he quits. So her law firm starts coming after him and threatening him with all sorts of litigation, and he's going to be exposed for this and that and the other. And they're going to drag his family through a bunch of shit. And he kills himself. He kills himself. And they ask her about it, because they had fairly contemporaneous interviews with her. They ask her about it, and she's like, it's really sad what happened to George, or whatever his name is. Okay, no, she didn't say that. I'm sorry. I was saying whatever his name is. She says, like, well, it's really sad what happened to him, and, you know, I hope that his family finds the healing that, you know, they deserve, or whatever. And the whole time she just doesn't blink. She has dead eyes. She's just a complete psycho. I mean, you can just see that she has no ability to sense human empathy, right? Like, she is just, or to exert empathy. She is just completely lost in this world of, like, craven capitalism and Silicon Valley. And in the meantime, dude, she's going to all these government meetings and getting government contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars at a time, because she's guaranteeing that this is going to save lives in war overseas, in combat overseas, by being able to do quicker transfusions or do quicker testing to see if people are infected or anything like that. And so the government is all on board. The military is like, dude, we can save lives and we can say that we're investing in our troops and shit. Well, shit, of course. Like, of course we're going to invest in this. And hundreds of millions of your tax dollars are going to pay this dumbass who has just lied her way to being a 100 millionaire, or a couple hundred millionaire. And so finally, somebody leaks, right? Like, somebody basically rats, and it all unravels. And she just continues to lie. She completely dies with the lie. She's still dying with the lie, because they're on trial right now. She completely dies with the lie, and has for the last several years, because I think they were indicted in 2018. So she's pled not guilty, and her CFO, who she was fucking, has pled not guilty. They are, and they're just dying with the lie. So I watched this, right? And I think I've given you a little bit of the interweaving insanity that I was feeling the entire time. But I watched this, and at the end, it really just expanded the idea in my mind of like, this is our leading industry. Like, this is what America produces. Is software and Silicon Valley and bullshit and like tech startups and like that type of shit. And sure, sometimes it works out and these things are incredibly profitable, and Google and Facebook and stuff like that, which even then those companies aren't even profitable because they operated at a loss for such a long time on the taxpayer dime that like they're not even profitable. Like, Amazon just now started turning a profit. Like, last year was the first year that they turned a profit. Like, just think about that. They don't run with the same rules as regular businesses. If you owned like a t-shirt store, right? And you weren't profitable, you would go out of business. But because Amazon has swindled local governments into saying like, we employ X amount of people, and if we pick up and leave, or if we go out of business, your people are fucked. We've let them get that big to where they get to make that demand of our governments. And so what happens is you end up with Amazon having this enormous amount of power. And so these companies operate at a loss. They get tax credits and they get benefits and all that type of shit. And they operate at a loss, but also they have all this venture capital money from billionaires who are investing this money knowing that one day Amazon's going to be the most profitable company in the world, or Tesla is going to be the most profitable company in the world, and they will have got in at this level, and they're going to reap the benefits, right? And so they are backing up Amazon's losses by just throwing money at these people. It's the same thing with almost all of these people. Netflix, Google, Facebook, Twitter for sure, Snapchat. Like, these companies don't run at profits, but everybody's just betting that they will. Everybody's investing in these companies, betting that at some point, Uber for sure, they're just betting that like it works out in the end, and these companies succeed in buying up every other piece of the market and being monopolies so that they finally turn a profit, because their margins are so razor thin that they have to own 90 to 95% of the market, to where they, when they finally do start making money, if they do, everything else in their market segment is completely out of business, right? Now, if they don't, like, let's say 10 years from now, Amazon still doesn't make money. Apple does, well, Apple makes money, but Amazon doesn't make money. Netflix doesn't start making money. Snapchat doesn't start making money. Twitter doesn't start making money. That's a huge bubble that's going to explode. Way bigger than the tech bubble in the 90s. Way bigger. Because these people's stock prices are insane. And when they're not selling off stocks so that they can fund space exploration or whatever the fuck, they are paying themselves in stock buybacks. And so it's built on nothing. And the problem that this movie exposes is like, we're just throwing all of our money at that. And that would be fine if it was a bunch of morons, like a bunch of moron billionaires that were just playing the short game and were just throwing piles of money at stupid people like this chick. That would be fine. Because it's their money, fuck them. Like, I hope they lose their money, right? But because it's stupid, you know, like, to not look at the machine before you invest in the company, to not even ask the simplest question of like, well, hey, you're making a lot of bold claims here. Does it work? Nah, they were just like, all right, honey, here's $200 million. You deserve to lose your money. I'm sorry. And so, if that happens, right, it all crumbles. It's all just like, it's all built on nothing. You know, like, and this movie also points out the fact that, you know, the fact that we have people that are that rich that they can just be like, what's $100 million? I don't have to ask questions about what I'm doing with $100 million or $500 million or $10 million at that. Like, I don't have to ask any questions. I don't have to ask if the machine actually works. I don't have to ask if any scientists actually work for you. I don't have to ask if you're even a scientist or a doctor even. All I have to do, or if you employ any doctors, all I have to do is just go, yeah, that sounds like it'd be cool. And that's all $100 million means to me. That is it. That is a perfect illustration of why we need to raise taxes on these people. Because for every dollar of that they do, it's double the problem, because this chick and other people like her, including the Googles of the world and Amazons of the world, who are contracting for hundreds of millions of dollars to the federal government and spending our taxpayer dollars on those companies. And so those companies are getting an infusion of both VC cash, which is just nonsense play with money for most of these most of these multi-millionaires and billionaires even. It's just play money. It's just like money that you give to your accountant and just say, like, make me, 2% on this, or make me 10% on this, or whatever, right? Just give me a good return. And most of these VC guys have worse records than the stock market. Way worse. If you just stashed your money, Trump's a good example of this. Trump is like, I had this big pile of cash, and I started my business, and I got all these hotels and shit. If you took the money that Trump started with, and then the money that Trump says he has now, which, whatever, debatable, but okay. Even the money he says he has now, the $3 billion or whatever he says he's worth, right? If he had just stuck the money that he started out with in the S&P 500, he would be like double rich. And so, like, they're not that smart, bro. Like, they're not that good at this, and we're putting them at the wheel. And like I said, it's twofold. One, that we've geared our economy so hard to this, and that it's such a big industry, and it's involved in every moment of our daily lives. Like this lady was trying to get involved in healthcare, but we're already in front of Facebook and Google and all that bullshit every day. I mean, Google has a monopoly on search. And the fact that these companies have such a huge market share, and they envelop so much of our lives every day, right? The fact that that's the case creates a dynamic where we are investing an insane amount of taxpayer dollars into them all the time. Because if it's not in the form of like actual government contracts like Amazon has with the government to build cloud networks for them to store all of their fucking classified documents on, or Google with their similar arrangement, but also their government contracts to do self-driving car initiatives and AI work, and they contract to the military for that's why they got rid of their do no evil slogan a couple of years ago. So we spend taxpayer money on that. But then the second layer of that is that we have these morons with way too much of society's resources because they are able to throw it away on these idiots that don't back up anything about their businesses, that don't use actual facts or science. They just literally, and you'll hear this if you watch anything about Silicon Valley, fake it till you make it. They will literally just fake it till you make it. That's literally the Uber story. Uber was like, well, we could probably crowdsource taxis and put taxis out of business, but the only way that this works is if we completely smash the taxis. It's the only way, because otherwise the taxis are state regulated. And so, right, and the only way that this works is if we can skirt ever being regulated. Actually, that's what I meant. The only way that Uber is ever going to make it to 100% is if they can skate being regulated, which is not working, and that's why they are saying that they're going to strike. Just to fight the government. Like, they understand class solidarity more than we do. Hold on, drink. And so, like, we have a completely rotted financial system because it's propped up on all this nonsense that is just a bunch of frat nerds and like 26-year-olds just going like, yeah, I think I can invent time travel. And people are going, damn, time travel will be lit. Here's $100 million that I just had in my nightstand. This is the $100 million that I keep in my copy of War and Peace on the third shelf of my library at home. You just have that. You just have that, and you go off, Marty McFly, and you invent your time machine, and hope it works out. And as a matter of fact, I got a couple $100 million more if it doesn't work out and you need to hire some more people and just keep this thing going. Just make sure that you look trendy and hipster, and make sure that you get a bunch of good press so that I can say that I was one of the initial investors in your company. And the fact is, when this all doesn't work out, because it's not gonna, right? Like, yes, Amazon might work out, but eventually, the problem with Amazon is they made the same equation. They made the same evaluation. They were like, the only way that this works is if we own the entire market. Well, the problem is, Amazon sells everything. Everything. And so if they own the percentage of the market that they need to own to truly be profitable, which is the whole point of capitalism and the entire point of why they would exist, and their shareholders will accept nothing less, right? If that's the case, then they're going to rot out 80 to 90% of everything in the economy in order to become profitable. And when that happens, no one will be employed by anybody except Amazon. And eventually they will run out of customers, and so the company will explode. And so, because they don't pay people enough to be able to buy enough of their goods to... Now, granted, this is decades from now, probably, but I don't know. COVID is accelerating this insanely. But they don't pay people enough, especially with the number of people they would be employing. They don't pay people enough to... for them to be profitable customers. You know, like Amazon's profitable customer, because their margin is so thin, is probably somebody who spends a couple $100 a month on Amazon. Just buying bullshit. Or the people who buy their groceries. You know, like people legit buy their groceries from Amazon. You know, or they go to Whole Foods, and that's Amazon money. And so, like, that would be catastrophic, right? And so it's never going to work. This business model does not work. I'm a moron. Like, I don't run a business. I'm not a billionaire by any stretch, but even I can see that doesn't make any sense. If you have to own 80 to 90% of the market in order for you to be even a little bit profitable enough to impress your shareholders, and for them to consider, for them to think that they turned a profit and that their investment was worthwhile, which is why they have all these investor calls, and they're always like, we're going to do it, don't worry. If you have to have that much market share, it's not sustainable. Because eventually, right, it's a race to the bottom. Eventually, so in the case of Uber. So, Uber kills the taxis in most major cities, and they're riding high for a little bit, right? Like, it looks like they're on the rise to where they're going to get to a point where they're profitable. But now the government is stepping in and saying, hey, bro, you can't pay people basically slave wages and not give them benefits just because you're refusing to call them employees when they are literally your means of generating profit. I mean, even in this crumbling, ridiculously capitalized government, even they, that's how you know how bad it is, even they are like, wait, hold on, bro. You can't employ millions of Americans and then say they're not employees. That's ridiculous. And so the courts are basically saying, like, fam, you have to reclassify. At least they are in California. And as California goes, normally, eventually the rest of the country goes. Because there's such a thing as regulating interstate commerce. The Commerce Clause in the Constitution would eventually level that out. And so, plus there would be so much public pressure. Because if you had people in California that were working for Uber making more money than people who are in Texas working for Uber, you would have a real problem. And there would be so much public pressure on Uber, but also on the government to chastise Uber for that behavior, that it wouldn't work. And so these are the companies. This is why we're so fucked. Is because this is the heart center of the economy. It is the oil that everybody thinks is running the economy. Yeah, oil helps. Don't get me wrong. And especially in places like Texas, and oil and natural gas, especially in places like Texas and Oklahoma, like oil and natural gas, of course, right? Like that's what's keeping most state economies afloat, which is devastating the environment and terrible for everyone involved. But what is actually keeping the federal economy afloat is a whole bunch of technological bullshit that doesn't actually produce anything and doesn't actually need to employ people. Like that's the problem with it, is these companies eventually, not now, and maybe not in 30 years, but eventually, if you're trying to run a country, you got to think a few steps ahead. And if you're trying to set up for people's grandchildren and shit, you got to think a few steps ahead. Eventually, these companies will be able to basically automate everybody out of a job. And you might say, oh, well, Kyle, that's true about every industry. It is. And that's why we have to step in, because it's going to destroy everybody's lives. A lot of like third partiers and kind of like wacko Democrats jumped on the Yang train for this reason during the election, because he was talking about automation, and people know in their lizard brains that it is going to be a problem. Like, what happens when the Tesla 18-wheeler comes out and they don't have to pay driver salaries anymore, and that union is so weakened that they can't stand up for themselves? That's the number one employer in America, is truck drivers. What's going to happen then? Right? And so, like, we are at an apex of where we need to make a decision, because we need to do one of two things. Well, really, there is, in my view, only one solution to the automation problem. You have to make it law that a certain percentage, and I mean like probably 80 to 90% of the profits made from replacing a human worker with a robot worker has to be paid into a fund, a government program, right? The same way that it's sort of the same way that we fund Social Security with paycheck, with a payroll tax. You have to take that money and put it into a big giant bucket, and then give people a universal basic income. And I mean like a living one. Because here's the thing, right? People forget that, and weirdly enough, boomers and Gen Xers forget this. When they were the ones that were reading all the books and shit when they were kids about how, like, one day we were going to have flying cars, and humans don't have to toil at the workplace anymore. They only have to work 10-hour weeks pushing buttons on a robot, and then they go home, and the modern way is to not work and enjoy time with your family and kick back on the veranda and all that bullshit. Right? That was the whole point of why we started developing this technology. It was eventually like, our cars will be made by robots, and so all those people can just like go in and work on the robots for a couple hours and then go home, and they still get paid their salaries and shit, but the company's not out more money because they've got a robot running the thing, and they're able to live a decent life because they're paid a living wage. That was the whole idea. That was the understood idea of all that sci-fi bullshit when the boomers were growing up and when Gen X was growing up. Especially when the boomers were growing up, because like we were going to the moon, and the possibilities kind of seemed endless as far as the future and what we were going to be able to do over the next half a century, which would have been possible, I think. A lot of the technological things that like boomers and Gen Xers dreamed about back in the day, and we have written off as like, fuck that, that's never going to happen. And it's at least not going to happen when, before global warming kills us all. If we had continued to invest public money in places like NASA, or facilities like Boston Dynamics and stuff like that, we would be way farther technologically. I mean, you could argue that we would be on a renewable energy source already. We would be, because when it's public money, there is no profit motive, so there is no reason to not continue to push. When you're a scientist working for a company, scientists want to keep scientisting. They want to keep discovering shit. That's the whole incentive of the system. That's why healthcare doesn't work in this country. People who have what I like to call a shallow understanding of class consciousness, they like to say something along the lines of like, they probably have the cure for cancer, and they've just got it locked away so that they can, keep selling people medicine. Right? And I think that's a really rudimentary way of looking at it. I think that what it's more like is like, hey, we're making so much money on selling cancer drugs that like we're going to fund other things before we fund the cure for cancer. And yeah, we're given a few bucks, a few, tens of millions or whatever every year to funding cancer research. But we got to market this new drug. And so we're going to spend 80% of our money on the marketing part, and then we might spend 20% plus a little government kick in to work on, an actual cancer cure. And so it's not that they have it and they're not releasing it or something. It's that it's not a priority because it's not as lucrative, because there's profit involved. Cuba, which has a public healthcare system, a publicly funded healthcare system where the doctors are actually government employees, I know, very scary. They have a cancer vaccine. They have developed a cancer vaccine. Now, granted, I don't know the details of how much cancer that cures or what the circumstances are as far as when you need to have it. But if the medical community is coming out and saying there's a cancer vaccine out there, they're not lying. That's a big deal. And that's because their healthcare system is publicly funded, and the incentive is around doctors trying to do the best work. Not your best and brightest people going into plastic surgery because it's the way to make the most money. Or your best and brightest people going into neurosurgery, which is super important and great, but maybe we could use those people in research for actual disease that are killing people. Like, there are costs, right? Like, everything, oh my God, maybe I pulled the thread. Everything is about allocation of resources, man. Everything. It's about looking, and this if you own a business, or if you have ever like had an allowance, like had to balance a checkbook, gotten a paycheck. Like, every regular person knows this. We just can't manifest it into our politics for whatever reason. And that's the thread. And so, like, it is an allocation of resources thing. It's the reason that everything is screwed. And that goes back to the two lab companies that own 80% of the market share in this country for lab testing. LabCorp and Quest. Quest was the other one, of course. Quest and LabCorp. They own the two. And you could see how this dynamic that people claim exists in the cure for cancer thing plays out when two huge companies do 80-90% of the testing in this country. Guess what we have to test for right now? We're in the middle of a pandemic. And whether you believe it's real or not, which, whatever, but whether you believe it's real or not, the implications of that are we got to test a shitload of people so that we can open the economy again. Like, we got to kind of get on this so that people can go back to work and they know that they're safe, right? Like, if you were getting a test every day when you walked into work and you knew that people who tested positive were being turned away at the door, right? Then you'd be super happy to go back to work and make a living and not have to be on unemployment or be locked in your house all the time. Or even worse, you could go out and get a job because now you're unemployed because the restaurant that you work for went out of business, or the bar that you work for went out of business, or the retail establishment that you work for went out of business. And so you could get, the job market would kind of reopen back up. You could get hired somewhere else and know that you'll be safe and not bring it home to somebody that's immunocompromised. Plus, we could open schools if you had rapid, readily available testing, because you could test every kid as they come in the building. You're positive. I'm sorry, Timmy, you can't come to school today. Why don't you go get on the bus that's taking people home? Or why don't you go over here? You know, we'll take you over here and we'll call your mom and tell her to come pick you up. Which would have the implications of people being able to go back to work because they don't have to worry about homeschooling their kids. Or people not being under an enormous amount of stress because they have to work and homeschool their kids and do everything else that they're responsible for and worry about getting sick. But that's not happening because we have two companies that run the entire market for testing in LabCorp and Quest, and they are legitimately not incentivized to make that available. Because why would they? They're going to make the same amount of money regardless. And plus, if it gets bad enough, the federal government will step in. Excuse me. The federal government will step in and write them a big juicy contract for $500 billion or whatever the fuck. That will then incentivize them with a big giant paycheck to start doing testing. But until they get that, there is no incentive. Whereas if you had hundreds, if not thousands, of small labs that were obviously capable of communicating with each other and would be under some sort of umbrella, but are independently owned, right? Then you would have independent labs competing with each other on a rapid basis, trying to find the best way to administer tests on a mass scale. And not just tests on a mass scale, but tests that are quick results and accurate. Because so far, we don't have any of that. The CDC has completely fucked that off. And that's the thing. That is the thing. Is because we have failed to regulate these people, and because the allocation of so many resources in that market, and you see this with the fact that we don't make PPE in the States, it's outsourced all to China or Asia in general, and so we're having a hard time even getting doctors and hospitals the correct amount of PPE or PPE in schools because we're short on it, because we don't make it here and it's in demand all around the world. And so we're having to retrofit companies that make other things in order to make half-ass shit. And we took months to even do that because we were spending 3 or 4 months denying that it was even a thing. It is an allocation of resources problem, and the only way that you are going to solve it is to smash some of these big-ass companies into a billion pieces and scatter them to the winds. It is the only way, and I know that it's hard for people to put that into their mind as happening in their lifetime, because that would be a cataclysmic change to the way we live our day-to-day lives. It would be jarring for people, and I get that that creates anxiety. I get that that weighs heavily on people. I completely understand that. But the fact is, we all know, back in our lizard brain, we all know that whether it's our generation or our kids' generation or their kids' generation, someone is going to have to do it. Someone is going to have to smash these motherfuckers into a million pieces and regionalize them, and some of them are going to have to be taken over by the state. We all know this. Even in their little tiny amygdalas, way, or whatever that is, way back there, medulla oblongatas, way back there. Even right-wingers know it. Because it's not sustainable. Eventually these people will have too much power, and we will have to smash them. You already see companies that are that big. It's also the reason that you can't get decent internet service in America. We have some of the worst internet speeds in the world because there is no incentive, because 3 companies do it all. And so they're like, screw it. We have basically it's really just 2 companies now. We have a duopoly on the service. That's why Google can come in and charge half as much. It's because they have all this excess money laying around. They got to invest it in something, so they might as well lay a little bit of wire in your city, a little bit of fiber optic in your city, and get people to sign up for $45 a month. Because they're basically functioning as a government, and so that they can run at a loss because they're so large. So yeah. Now you understand my brain disease. Now you understand how just the regular old just normal movie or book or audiobook or just anything that regular people seek out for entertainment. Now you can see how it literally just I don't know. I enjoy it from an entertainment standpoint, but about 20 minutes later, I'm like, God damn it. God damn it. So, I don't know how long that was, but I feel like it was a long time. So, y'all have a good night. See you tomorrow.